or her own life, right? A whole life, you're talking
Mhm.
about customers being a small percentage of that. You have spouses, kids, parents, grandparents, even your competitors. They're all people too. You have to be able to deal with them on a more humane basis, not the kind of stuff that we hear all the time about, I take your lunch, you eat my breakfast, and all of that stuff that we hear. It's really not beneficial, not only to the entrepreneurs, but to their end users. And that's one of the reasons why I emphasize these people as a separate fundamental
Mhm.
apart from the customer. So I will tell you how I deal with the people aspect. But if you have any questions on that discussion as to how I separate customers and people, I will go further on that.
Just so that I can reflect back what I think I heard, essentially we're talking about non-customer stakeholders when we're talking about the word people. It's the rest of the human universe outside of the direct customer, at least in the context of this conversation. Is that a correct statement? At
It
least
is a correct statement, although it doesn't have to be too broad in such a way that you're
okay.
dealing with one's life goals.
Okay.
Maybe they have relations in their personal life. We're not talking about that. It's still in the context of an entrepreneur. So I'll give you an example. You
Okay.
have a business, you have customers, but you have employees. They're
Yep.
people too. You have to help them, deal with them, and lead them just the way you would, using the skills that you learned from your customers to apply toward them. But the other thing too, Eamon, a business now in this world, in this connected world, I should say, is not a boxed in entity anymore. You're dealing with everyone outside that entity all the time. So, your community, for example, you have to go out there and perform for your community, offer your expertise or your services for free sometimes because you want to get them to buy into what you're doing and then benefit from it. Local universities, those are some of the things that you have to do. So these are all people that don't really bring you revenue, but they bring you brand awareness. And that's one of the reasons why, as an entrepreneur, you still have to think about people above and beyond your own customers.
Right. And just to play back, so I'm hearing correctly. So when we're talking about the fundamental of people, number one is we're talking about the people that the entrepreneur interacts with above and beyond just the immediate customers, so employees or peripherally stakeholders or members of the population that are somehow impacted by their product or you have some kind of interaction with. And then, so where do we go from there? Okay, so now if that's correct, that's kind of the universe of people. So what am I supposed to do as a fundamental here? Because I heard the last time we had, oh yeah, focus on their needs as far as customers and these other things I'm supposed to do. What am I supposed to do with this people piece now? Where do I,
Oh,
okay, what do I do with this?
okay, so I will only tell you what I do.
Okay.
You have to determine it for yourself how you want
Okay.
to deal with. But now you identify this issue where dealing with your customers in a good
Yep.
way, keeping your best behavior is
Yep.
not enough. It is great, and you're learning something from it. That's great. But you have to use that skill set to deal with other people. And as a matter of fact, it's part of your business too. When you're developing the community, helping them, it's going to help you as a business person.
Mhm.
So you're not just doing it for just for the fun of it. It's also required as a business person to grow. So community relations are so important, whether that's at a city level or county level or state level or even federal or global level. Depending on the type of business you have, the kind of vision that you have, you may have to go through all of those layers. And that's really what I'm talking about. It's not just as personal relations, being a good person. No, it makes sense for a good business entity to be able to do all of these things. So I'll tell you what my way of doing it, and I'm not doing a great job, by the way. I'm still learning. The In my view, Eamon, the richest person in the world is the kindest person.
Mm.
Okay, just think about that. Let that sink in for you and for everyone else. It took me a lot of time to get to that stage. So you cannot just go brag about how much money I have. What you have to do is how kind you are toward other people. When you're dealing with people, that's really what I use as the method of dealing with people. So kindness becomes my entryway to dealing with people.
So how do you deal with that, Dr. Stalker, in the sense that, in a sense, you're trying to help people, but I think kindness sometimes gets mixed up with a kind of a sentimental babying or treating people with kid gloves. I don't think that's what you mean by kindness, is it?
No,
Like,
that's not what I'm talking about. So remember the leading concept we talked
yes,
about in the case of businesses, right?
yeah,
One of the key fundamentals, in fact, the only fundamental that it hinges on is our ability to separate people from things and let them not be so attached to things we will not be able to lead them. But my way of leading people is by through kindness. When I say kindness,
yes,
I'm not saying I don't want to be clear to them.
right.
At the same time, I was telling you about ruthless management of things,
Mm-hmm.
but that can only happen when people don't take those things personally. So I should be able to say, Eamon, you and I are talking about as a person, I'm kind to
Right.
you, you're kind to me. But some of the ways that you're dealing with in the business, like budgets and time and um, you
Mm-hmm.
know money management, whatever the things that I might find that I need to improve in you, you have to be able to allow me to do that. So I'm being kind to you, but I'm not kind to things that you do.
And
And
I can see like, okay, so there's a linkage to the idea of goodness that we talked about in spreading goodness through innovation. I think, but the word, so just to make sure that I'm tracking here, so we've got, and I know that this is challenging, but we've got the word people, and then we got the word kindness, and then we got the word, the happiest people are those who are kindest. So um, I guess we've talked about, I think let's just go on the assumption we know what a person is. We're talking about human beings, conscious human beings. I'm still a little confused as to what kindness means in the context of, um, you know, it's just a slippery word for me, because I often, what exact type of behavior constitutes kindness in your view?
well, there are lots of examples. I can give you one,
Mhm.
but remember this too, Eamon. Kindness to me serves two end goals for me, because kindness tells me that I'm really providing the best thing for them without any preconceived notions about any of the things, without bringing my baggage. So that's why I
Okay.
call kindness. But I'll give you a specific example. But it serves another purpose, and that is when I'm leading. When I separate people from their things, they are like, okay, bring it on. You and I would have to work on this budget problem that I always. They're going to say that's a problem. They're not going to say it's part of me and you're not attacking me when I
Mhm.
want to emphasize on the budget problem. So you and I
So,
would work on that
okay.
budget problem together without you taking that personally. So it allows me to lead you with kindness, and I will define what kindness is specifically, but that really serves two purposes for me as far as why I'm doing it.
So kindness in one context means helping me separate myself from things so that we can get on with the business of managing things effectively. I guess that's one kind of connotation I've got out of that. And then another implication of kindness is that it's because it's allowing you to focus on, because you're focusing on needs of people, you're being kind to them because you're really helping them solve their problems in a non-egotistical way because you're truly in it for them. Is that a good summary of what you just said?
It is. So kindness, in my view, Eamon, the way I define it is,
Sorry, I'm just getting caught up
no,
ahead.
no, no, this is actually an important point. So when you put others' needs about you, yours, okay,
Yeah.
that's what I mean by kindness. So you're talking about my selfish needs versus your needs.
Right.
Okay. So if I put your needs above everything else and I'm doing my best to help you achieve that, that's what I mean by kindness. And I do this for one simple reason, Eamon. I realized early on in my career, when I was a young man, I always knew my talents were more than I could ever use for myself.
Right.
Okay. So that's why it made it easy for me to say, hey, I could do all of that for myself, but I have a lot more. I want to give it to somebody else. And when you want to give it to somebody else, you're really not trying to get something back. That's really what I
Okay.
mean by
So,
kindness.
okay. So, and that gets back to the knowing thyself. And in knowing thyself, we said, as a part of knowing thyself, one should know one's capacity and what is surplus capacity. And then kindness then is part of the process of giving that surplus capacity back to others. But that, I guess, connotes the idea that you understand that it is surplus capacity, not kind of core capacity. Because I think that's where we get caught up sometimes, because people are giving away core, they don't have the capacity to give. They are actually giving too much of themselves. So it's within the context of knowing that you have excess capacity that you're being kind, uh, and that you're not like draining yourself, if you will. Does that make sense? Does
It,
that
it, it makes a lot of sense, actually. There's a reason why people are not kind. There is a reason why people are selfish, not because they are bad people, but they do not know how much they have and what they need. So their needs are not clearly defined to themselves. Their talents and hard work are not defined to them clearly. So that's why they always think about getting something for myself and they are only looking inwards. And
So
the
that's
realization of,
basically based on on like what you're saying is that that is based on a sense of need or want that may not actually be real. They might have a sense of lack when they have actually got surplus, but they have a psychological experience of lack. So therefore, they're trying to grab everything, even though they have surplus. Is that a fair statement?
it is a fair statement. As a matter of fact, that's one manifestation of one's confusion. One's
Mm.
confusion actually manifests in that way simply because they're not able to uh, become a true entrepreneur. In my view, being an entrepreneur is really all about giving. And
Mm-hmm.
there are selfish people that are becoming entrepreneurs because they're
Yes.
thinking they're going to get something to
And
themselves.
it's kind of ironic now that you mention it that a lot of people that are drawn to being entrepreneurs are people who feel lack. When what you're saying is the people who should be drawn to entrepreneurship are the people with surplus. And that's kind of a very interesting juxtaposition of the psychological drivers of success. Because one looks at, the billionaires of the world, and one would have to say that it almost seems like they have psychological problems at times because they're so driven to accumulate. Actually, Richard Burton had an interview. I think I mentioned this, where he said that he had several million pounds and he lived in a lovely house in Switzerland, and he knew many people that had hundreds of millions of pounds, which of course is even a lot more money than it is today because it was back in the 70s. And he said they were terrified of losing their hundreds of millions. You know, it's kind of like hell to be rich if you're if you're constantly tired, worried about losing it.
But there's one point I want to put on that, Eamon,
Yeah.
and you made a good observation there. Maybe that's one reason why entrepreneurs that we know of, they're only accumulating for themselves. Okay, that, let's say that's a reason, but it points to what I always call the delta. Okay, so just because you don't realize you have surplus doesn't mean you are stuck with that concept for the rest of your life. You could still say, I have this delta, I need to improve upon that. It's never too late. Let's put it that way. Somebody who thinks he or she has no surplus, and that's why they're accumulating everything to
Right.
themselves.
I think another manifestation of that is the retirement culture, frankly, Dr. Stalker, where it's kind of like, I'm going to retire at 30, this kind of idea, or I'm going to retire at 50 because I've got enough for myself, and then it's to hell with everybody else. I've got mine, and it's like, I always found that a kind of an unbelievable attitude to life, just personally. I can understand it. And there's many a day I wake up and say, wow, I can understand why, but it is a kind of an anti-life sentiment in some sense. I don't know, maybe I'm just being judgmental there. I tend to be judgmental at times, but it does seem to be another aspect of, I've got enough for me and I'm not willing, and like, I'm checking out, uh, versus what you're saying is, measure what you need, measure your surplus, and always be in the mode of giving away your surplus in the in the in the context of kindness.
It's also possible, Eamon, you could still improve upon that. You could,
Yeah.
you through your hard work and your talents, that hidden talents that you may not realize, you would still be able to get to that surplus, and then give to others. In fact, when somebody is not evolved to that level, I would really encourage them to do something else,
Right.
because entrepreneurship is really about giving. And if you are not able to give without expecting something back, there is something there. And that's why I said, if you are just a one man band and you don't have to lead anyone else, that's one thing. But when you're developing something, you have a recipe, a number of people, it's nearly impossible for anyone to lead other person without that kindness, Eamon. And I'm not really talking about, some goodness part where, this doesn't have any real bearing in the entrepreneurship world. No, it does. Your relations with the outside world, they improve so much when you actually have this ability.
Well, in your particular context, Dr. Stalker, given your abilities and given you had a decision to make, essentially, do I want to take my knowledge and, I guess, computational fluid dynamics and use it to accumulate, or do I want to use it to be kind? I think you, in your personal context, you had that decision you had to make. Would that be fair?
Yes,
Would that
yes,
be?
I had to make that decision. And if I did not, I would still be a good person, don't get me wrong, but I would be accumulating stuff for myself. I will have a bunch of papers, and people would know my papers, they'll cite my papers and things like that. But that's, to me, is not proactive offering of my abilities to serve others. That's one of the reasons why I chose the private sector versus the academic and government sectors, where you do not have that exposure like you do in the
Right.
private sector.
And I think we're at a point in history where innovation, like, essentially, I think we're at the last stages of old capitalism where you invest $1 and you get, like, to me, what does zero interest rates mean? Zero interest rates surely means that money doesn't make money anymore, which then, if capital is no longer functioning as the driver of the economy, it's now being supplanted by innovation, ideas. What do you think? Is it like, I'm just saying ideas and people seem to be taking over because money, if you believe the fact that it's 0% interest rate, what does 0% interest rates mean? It means that money doesn't make money anymore. It's not creating, you can't, they, if I invest $100, I'm expecting nothing back in terms of additional value, you know. I just want you to hold on to my money. So then the question is, if money isn't where money value is coming out of the thing, it's people, right? And then if people are an innovation, and then if they don't have kindness, we're going to have a big problem. It feels like.
It is true, even, and I'll tell you this: money never actually made that much money. It was a falsehood. And I touched on this, to say what the value of money is. It's like old newspaper. It is reflecting productivity that has been done up to that point, and that's reflected in the money. So if you go to a bank, it gives you 2% if you're lucky. That's really the true value of money. So all of the other innovations that improved, got more return, more productivity, was not because of the money. It was because of something
which
else.
which is why the market is the market has some rationality in it, that all of the tech stocks are orientated towards people innovation, and all of the, like, the delta of buying like stocks in a coal mine is going down because the value isn't there, so I think we're in this unique, and that's why I think where you come into play, Dr. Stalker, because for me you're the embodiment of a new age, and we've talked about Harry Seldon and stuff. It's the age of the Harry Seldons, to use the Isaac Asimov analogy, where we've got people like you coming into the picture who have the promise of transforming things, but you're not operating on on that historical principle. You've got a new set of principles that you're operating against.
They sound new, Eamon, but they're so old-fashioned. That's really the beauty about this. People are talking about Industry 4.0, information age, and all of that, but they're still really falling into the same trap that they did before. It was cash, it was gadgets, now it's
Market share,
information. No, it's
market share.
information. It's the same thing. All of that has one thing in common. That's people.
I
When
think
you're
that
able
is
to
the
take
real
care of people,
tragedy of Amazon, by the way, because Amazon doesn't cater to needs. It's a huge catalog of products. And it's amazing to me that it hasn't evolved into something that, like, what do you need, mate? Like, and I think it's such an incredibly hard problem, um, that our economy, our most successful corporation, is essentially a product catalog company,
well,
and it
Eamon,
seems
I'll
like an
tell you this.
incredibly, it doesn't map to what you're speaking to. What you're saying is you should be asking them what he needs. Amazon's just it's just a big old catalog, and oh yeah, maybe it's got the needs, and I can put in a text search, but what comes up are basically, like, they're not certainly. Do you know of any products on Amazon that are configurable, really?
I will tell you this, Eamon.
Sorry, maybe I'm off base
Yeah,
here.
no, no.
Again, yeah, yeah.
You're touching on some things that are important in the marketplace, but I
Mhm,
don't define success the way the market does. Okay,
mhm.
that's why you have, richest person in the world, and you have the celebrity culture, and putting them on a pedestal. That's all going on now, but it's really bad for the consumer when you define that culture, making them hooked on advertising, and you advertising the heck out of them and making them buy stuff they would ever, never, ever need. So those are the things that we're doing, but that's not how I define success. That's not how I define technology. The
Mhm.
way I define any of our entrepreneurial efforts is to make a customer's life better. So that's, never ever forget that fundamental. That's really why you want to be a business person. And if one of your products is making their lives worse, you should be the first one to say, I'm taking this off.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the kind of thing that you have to do. Of course, it goes back to your purpose.
Well, we have, yes, and we have a terrible, disastrous situation with insecticides and various other horrible things that are we're not living up to that by a long shot. And that gets back to the moral responsibility of the entrepreneur to do the right thing. I think we're shockingly lacking in that
And
area, to be
you,
honest.
you talk about the what's coming up. What's the new era
Yeah,
that's defined by what? It's not information, it's not robots, it's not technology. It's our ability to make our fellow human beings better.
right. And
That's
that is a huge, and that like gets back to this whole, um, like it's like racism is trying to make people worse. What you're talking about is trying to make people better, and it's like I think we are so struggling to break out of these 19th century ideas about reality. We are truly in an historic time where we're struggling as human beings to get beyond ideas that are so destructive to ourselves and each other, like categorizing people with labels and industrial waste and pushing like that's it. Really, what you're saying is we've got to get about making each other happy. That has to be our goal.
absolutely, because Eamon, that's, when you really think about this,
Mm-hmm.
there are means to achieve something and there is a goal. So means are never your goals. Technology is a means,
Yes.
robots are a means, information is a means, but what's your goal? The goal has to be defined. That's what I mean by purpose.
It is, and just to use the old, history. I think it's like, and maybe this is complete hogwash, but it's coincidental at least that we're going to the moon, and there's all this social turmoil around people trying to say there's a segment of society that are in pain, they're suffering. We have to relieve our brothers of this pain, and we have to treat each other equally and fairly. And now here we are 40 years later, and we're going back into space, and it's almost like it's a metaphor for our need to move into this new space that you're talking about. Break free of our old ideas and move towards these bigger ideas of being about growth and being about people and being about satisfying our most fundamental needs, not our most trivial needs or our harmful needs. And it's quite a profound, I'm just trying to wrap, and like that may or may not, you may not have, it seems an incredibly relevant thing to be talking about at this point in time, I guess, like this instant in time.
Well, Eamon, I'll tell you this. You might say this is incredibly new. To me, it doesn't seem like it's new because this has been there all along. People forgot about it. They
Yeah, I think what's
they
new,
focused on needs.
I think what's new, Dr. Stalker, is the fact that we've gotten so far away in business land, in entrepreneur land, and it's kind of like we've had morality here and what makes money in Wall Street there, kind of thing. You're trying to close that gap and say, look, the big loser is you. You're the big loser if you don't operate that, because you don't know yourself, you suffer, you've got your customers suffer, you suffer. You're the loser. By reducing the gap and understanding these basic things, will bring you to a deeper sense of happiness. And it's old stuff, but it's new because we've gotten so away from it. It's like words, like people would use these words to describe these things, but they were only words, Dr. Stalker.
Well, that's great, Eamon, and I want to make 2 points in that context. So, end goal, your destination. Let's put it that way, where we understand the destination is to get to Washington D.C., but you have so many different ways to get there.
Yeah.
So you don't celebrate the pathways to get there. You always have to focus on the end goal. So all of these things that we talk about, technology, information, this and that, they are all pointing to the means. One means, like going from one state to DC is different from another state to getting to DC. Those are ways, those are means, but that's not the end goal. The end goal, I'm saying, to human beings as entrepreneurs, particularly, even if they want to make money, is to make your customer lives better. That's really what the end goal is for an entrepreneur. When you understand that, your means are not going to make a huge difference. You could use technology, you could use non-technology, whatever makes sense to get to that end goal. But if you don't have that understanding,
Yeah.
I always talk about
Which,
purpose because of
which,
that.
which means you got to put doing good right front and center, and I think kindness means having that front, left, right, and center. And it's complicated only because we're so far away from simplicity. That's, it's almost like you get these things about the complicated guy is the most confused guy, and it's kind of like when you go back, you got these anthropological thing is in our sophistication, we're very primitive because we've lost track of these simple, basic ideas in our bid to be Mr. Economy or Mr. Flash Harry. You're actually nobody's winning, and least of all the entrepreneur himself. Uh, so,
I'll give you
so
one example there, Eamon. So you have a whiteboard. You've written a lot of equations, a lot of different ways of writing, and you sum them all up. After you do all of that math, there comes a number like 5. That 5 has been defined by a board full of equations. Okay, so when you look at it, you're not looking at 5. You're looking at all these segments on the board, but the end goal is when you sum it all up, subtract it, multiply, and this and that, it comes out to be just 5. That number is not understood by many, many people. They're only looking at the chalkboard full of equations. And only a few people could actually see number 5 from that clutter. And that's really what I mean when you say, what is your end goal? And if you don't have that, you're always doing all kinds of things with those equations. You're spending your whole life actually when you don't even realize at the end it's 5. Okay, that's an example I could give
yes,
you why people are confused about things.
right, yeah, we're stuck in the equation. Um, so, Dr. Stoker, we've come to the end of our. I think this was a really interesting conversation for me. I've the whole idea of people and kindness and tying it back to purpose and goodness and the situation we have in the world today and why this is really a lack coming home. I think bringing entrepreneurs home to their true purpose. I think it's all really very, very fascinating and interesting stuff, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Well,
Any final words?
I will give one more along these lines, Eamon. Now, if we want to colonize other planets, okay,
Yep.
taking some of us there, we're just going to repeat the same problems there in a matter of time. Okay.
Yes.
It's
So
not
just
going to get better when you get there.
yes.
You really have to work at it to make us better, not taking some people and you start another colony. It's going to come to the same. It's a matter of
Making
time.
ourselves better. Yeah.
So
And that's how we
really
get over racism and all our problems is making ourselves better, starting right here. I totally and it's like it's this externalization of problems is a problem. We are the problem and we are the solution. And I think that's really absolutely correct. It's
and
like
never focus on the means.
finding another planet ain't solving the problem. Moving to Mars ain't solving the problem.
and
We
never focus
ourselves
on
the
the
problem,
means.
but we are also the solution. God bless us. We are
It
also the
is
solution.
true, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing this, because it's going to have that impact, and we're going to show it. And I'm talking about, I don't believe in saying things, and that's why I haven't said for a long time. But living an example, setting an example is the best way to teach anyone anything. And
Right.
this is what we're going to be able to do through the enterprise universe purpose, spreading goodness through innovation, that innovation being technology, social innovations, economic, whatever that might be. We're going to do all of that, but we will never, ever forget our end goal.
Absolutely. So it's absolutely fantastic. Thanks a lot, Dr. Stalker, and we'll be back with everybody on Thursday. Stay
That sounds
tuned,
great.
and lots more exciting stuff coming.